This podcast discusses themes of mental health, which some people may find emotive, such as suicide or other adult-themed content. The information contained in this podcast is for entertainment purposes only. All views expressed are solely those of individuals involved and do not represent the opinions of any entity whatsoever with which we have been, are now, or will be affiliated. The information is not meant to diagnose or treat any mental health condition. If you're experiencing mental health symptoms, we encourage you to contact a mental health service within your community. If you're experiencing a mental health emergency, please seek the relevant support and interventions by presenting to your local accident and emergency department or contacting the relevant emergency services.
You're listening to the Men's Mental Health Podcast, The Man Hug.
Welcome to The Man Hug, the monthly men's mental health podcast. I'm Dean McShane.
I'm Dan Cooper.
I'm Ian Pearce-Hayes.
And I'm Conleth Kelly.
Each month we will discuss a different topic related to men's mental health, which will include a guest speaker who will discuss their own personal story. And each month we will also be showcasing an organisation or charity within the Merseyside area who work within mental health to help build your signposting skills.
Welcome to the Man Hug. I'm Ian, sitting in for Dean for this month's episode. Dean is en route as we speak for a winter's break, and we wish him from the Man Hug well, and hope he has a nice break. He's going to Oslo, isn't he? He's So I'm joined by our usual co-host Dan and Conleth, and we're also joined by Nat, who's back on the controls, twiddling and pushing buttons as we speak, as our sound engineer. So thanks for coming by. It's really nice to see you, Nat. Our theme for today's episode is addiction, and we have three guests today, including our colleague Walter Tasosa, who is a mental health practitioner, and we'll be discussing with Walter his interest and research into alcohol addiction. Following Walter, our focus is on the community service, and this month's service we'll be joined by Sam Batley from the Damien John Kelly House, which is a recovery living centre for men. It's based in Wavertree, and it uses art, sport, culture as a basis for recovery to provide a sense of purpose and meaning connection, and we'll be hearing from Sam later. Our first guest today, and big welcome to you, is Ben Taylor, better known as the Magic Mod, and he's toured with Paul Weller, the Libertines, Sean Ryder. So welcome, Ben. Thank you very much for coming over.
Thank you for having me, mate. Nice one.
Thank you, as I said, for coming to Liverpool. I know you're playing the Jacaranda tonight in Liverpool. So thanks for coming over, meeting us, and agreeing to talk to us and sharing your story. Perhaps we can start, Ben, with explaining what is you do, I guess, and also I'd be interested in how you got started and your interest in magic and how all that started.
What I do, I'm still trying to discover that myself, to be honest, mate. How I got involved in magic, story never changes. 6 years old, and my mum and dad got me a Paul Daniels magic set, and I was hooked on it from then. I never really had anyone in the family who did magic until recently. My dad disappeared, so, that's a magic trick, innit? But it gave me everything. As I mentioned a minute ago, if someone was to tell me the doors it would have opened when I opened that lid of that box, I wouldn't have believed you. It is given me everything, really. And on the back of that, I've got a lovely family and a little 3-year-old boy. And I'm very grateful for everything that's happened, and what Paul Daniels. If I often say this, and I don't think if there weren't a Paul Daniels, I can probably guarantee there wouldn't be a Magic Mod, because there wasn't anyone else who in the magic industry who really inspired me the way that guy did, because he was just in a league of his own. And the fact that a lot of good magicians still talk about that fella now, even, what is it, 7 or 8 years maybe that he's passed away? I might be wrong there. I'm not very good with dates and shit like that. I don't even know when my mum's birthday is, and I've known her since I was born, believe it or not. But it's like, I'd love to be talked about the same way as that guy is talked about in years to come, and hopefully it'd be for the good, and not just because I like my good music and you know, my dress sense. I want to be talked about because of the magic. Not, yeah.
Okay, that's really interesting. That in terms of, because I know Paul Daniels is not loved by everyone, but he's certainly recognised, I think, as you said, for his, you know, for his magic and his you know, stage presence and stuff as well. So that's interesting. How did that come about then, from then joining the Magic Circle and then actually touring with Paul Weller? How did that
that's a weird one, isn't it? Like, because again, someone could write a book about my whole career, right, and I could read it and go, shit, that didn't happen, because it, even talking about how it's all happened, it doesn't seem real, you know. Like, from a Paul Daniels magic set to then, it was actually 9 years yesterday that I went to Brighton Centre and I was warming up the crowd for Paul Weller. Like, that is mental to even say that. A guy who I idolised from a young age, I now ended up having a relationship with as a friend and still talk to him. And I still say this, most of the people I've met, what he gave me is priceless, because he gave me the confidence in myself and he gave me a lot of life-changing advice. And some of the advice I didn't take straight away, but then when I was a little bit wiser and I realised where my sort of life was going, I thought I should really take this advice now, and, you know, before it's too late. And it saved me, really. But it's going back to how it happened, it's sort of snowballed, you know. I was doing magic, didn't really have a name for myself. I just went around with a deck of cards in nightclubs and bars and pubs and whatever. You guarantee you show someone a trick, you're going to end up getting a free drink. You know what I'm saying? I could go out with a tenner and come back with 50 quid. You know, it was mental. But I never really thought it'd be something that I'd do shows with. I thought it was something that I loved and would bring a lot of happiness with me, because it was like my getaway. You know, I could lock myself in my room and shuffle my cards, where other people lock themselves in the room and look at Littlewood's catalogues and stuff like that. Isn't that right, eh? But it's like, it just gave, as I said, magic probably has saved me to some sort of extent. The more I think about it and the more I'm talking about it, you know, it probably has saved me, because it gave me a reason to want to better myself and do the things I've got. Like, I never used to set goals, right? And then when I did set goals, I found that I was ending up smashing them out of the park, and I was thinking, Jesus Christ, this is what life's about, right? You stop treating it as a party and go and enjoy yourself. Set yourself realistic goals. I set goals like, I wanted to perform, I wanted to do be on the TV, I wanted to support a band. Ended up doing Soccer AM, ended up doing a Tommy Cooper documentary talking about the great man, you know, and then other sports programs knocked on. And then, you know, but to get asked to, you know, like, open up for Weller, you know, but it wasn't on the stage. It was walking around the auditorium and mingling in with the crowd in between the acts, right? But then a year later, I went on tour with the Libertines, and I thought they were going to have me the same way, just walking about. But no, I was on the stage, and I remember we played Warrington Park Hall, was the first place. Iconical, man, yeah. Iconical. And it just, I don't know, it changed everything, because, like, as soon as I walked out there, I realised this is what I wanted to do. And I also realised that I ain't going to beat around the bush. There's no one doing it like that. There's no magician out there touring with a rock and roll band. Dynamo supported Ian Brown, because I think Ian Brown supported his work for years, and Dynamo's fantastic. And I never compare myself to Dynamo, because it's two different people. Like, his magic tricks are out of this world, phenomenal. But he couldn't do it the sort of way I'd do it, because I've got the whole charisma of, like, your Tommy Cooper and your Paul Daniels, and I have a laugh and a joke, where he's very serious. He'd get you to pick a card and then he'll find it. And I've met him once before in Brighton, and I remember I watched his show and I went up to him and went, mate, you've inspired me there. And I said, if you can do it, then I know I can. But I didn't mean it as a as like an insult, because sometimes I sort of say things without thinking, right? That's my problem. My wife's always saying you shouldn't have said that. But then I go, it's a bit too late now. It's out there, isn't it? You know, but it's like, I just seen a lad from Bradford, which he was, who, you know, he was bullied and magic saved him. And his granddad actually was his big inspiration, because his granddad used to do magic in the army, and he showed him a few tricks. And the first trick I think it was with a matchbox. And that inspired him then to be one of the. He's a household name. Let's have it right. Yeah. Dynamo. Everyone knows who Dynamo was. He was on the side of fucking Pepsi cans. You know what I mean? I couldn't get away from the fucker at one point. I remember going to my uncle's, and he gave me a Pepsi, and I was looking at the can. I was going, "Are you taking the piss here?" Like, do you know what I mean? But he's done fantastic, and hopefully, you know, the way my career is going at the moment, you know, maybe my face would be on a condom packet or something. You know, who knows?
Could be a catalogue. Could be like,
you never know.
Doing wavefronts.
Listen, forget the catalogues, mate. You got to get over it. Everything's online now, man. But I set myself realistic goals, as I said, right? And so far, they've been smashed. And that's what I like about not just what I do, just life in general, because it doesn't matter if. And I always say this to people: if you work in, I don't know, you're a garden centre, if you're a landscape gardener, you work in a golf club, it doesn't matter what you do, you can still set yourself a goal, you know. And I explain that to people, and I see some people, like there's this band who supported me the other day, and they were moaning about what they did, their job and stuff like this, and they're like, oh, I want, you know, I really need a break in this. And I go, look, it ain't going to come to you. Do you know what I mean? What are you expecting? Like, I don't know, fucking Simon Cowell, they knock on your door and go, "Oh, you're the next best thing." It don't work like that, mate. Trust me. Like, you need to go out there and earn your stripes and graft. I mean, there's times where I've done 4 shows on the back, boom, 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 and an extra one, and I nearly forgot it. And I've had like probably 4 hours sleep over all them nights. But the adrenaline keeps you going, and the reason why you're doing it keeps you going. And the reason for me is the love of this whole industry.
Yeah. I was going to say though, you know, you're saying before about you got the magic set and you give a lot of love to Paul Daniels and respect and whatnot, but you know, you can't take away the fact that you've must have worked so hard to master the trade and get as far as you have got, and now doing what you're doing. You know, the amount of, we were talking about aspirations last time, I think, or the time before. Yeah. You know, you had this aspiration and this goal to be a magician, and you've obviously worked extremely hard to get there. You know, so kudos to yourself. You know, don't give Paul Daniels all the credit. You know, you've had to work hard.
That's very kind of you. I never look at it like that, because, like, as I said, sometimes I get emotional when I think about it. Like, probably like that today. I don't know why. I'm having an emotional one. God knows why. Like, seriously, I haven't. But the path I choose now gives me time to reflect on stuff, and you soon end up getting emotional. And again, I don't know why, but it maybe because, like, as I said, like magic, and I've dedicated my whole life to it. And at one point, I nearly fucked it all up, all the hard work, because, you know, one thing or another. But like the fact that, I mean, yeah, man, I mean, I practice all the time. You know, my wife, God bless her, man, like she needs a certificate. Actually, she's got one, like a master's degree in nursing, right? And I always have this competition. Like, we've got a media wall, and on one side is her certificate, like a master's degree, and on the other side is my Magic Circle certificate. And we're looking at it, I was like, so which one's better, right? And then I'm like, yeah, but listen, there's less than 2,000 members in the Magic Circle, right? How many people have got what you've got? You know, only mucking about.
I have.
Yeah. But it's like mucking about with it, right? But one day, I always say that in the gig. I go, right, I'm one of the members. You know, no, anyone else in this room got a Magic Circle certificate? It's like, no. I was like, exactly. One day, some funny fucker will go, yeah, I have, and I'll be like, fucking prove it now, mate. But it's like, it is hard work, because, as I said, my mind doesn't switch off, and I've sort of addressed that more recently than not, because I just can't switch off. Like, as soon as I've done one thing, I'm thinking about the next thing. I'm always trying to be one step ahead. As I mentioned at the beginning, it sort of managing myself, being my own agent. I'm my own booking agent. I'm telling myself where I'm going to be playing. I sort out my own transport. Everything I sort out, and it's a lot for one person to do. Do you know what I mean? I'm my own tour manager, you know, and that's not like, oh, feel sorry for me. It's the path I've chosen, you know. I'm sure if you know, the right time come along and someone wanted to take the reins off me and push me in the direction that I want to go, fucking brilliant, and I'm all for it. But what motivates me the most is when I wake up and I see my little boy. Sorry, let me rephrase that. When he wakes up and then he wakes me up, like it motivates me because like I see his little face and I go like, today, like one day, hopefully you'll be proud of what I've achieved. Do you know what I mean? And it'd be like telling his friends how his dad's the magic mod.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah,
and that's brilliant. But listen, who knows? You know, at the moment, I've got so much love for this industry and what I do that I can't see myself doing anything else. And that is the honest truth.
Yeah, well, it's like, you know, as you said about Weller, like, you know, I've been a fan of his since probably about 13, 14. I always remember I actually had to learn to write again. And I always remember writing the lyrics to Burning Sky. Like, you know, it's a real...
That's my favourite. That's my favourite song.
You know, it's one of the best songs. I put that down in our playlist. It's one of my top songs, like, you know, Burning Sky. Just a dreamer you don't realise, and the sooner you do will be the better for you. And I always get choked up
Setting suns,
thinking that, whatever. And but, you know, I remember seeing you on Dapper Laughs, like, you know, doing this, and you just talk about Weller. And Weller's like, you know, somebody who, and personally, I wouldn't want to meet him, like, you know, don't make your heroes and all that kind of stuff, whatever. Then when I heard, whenever you said what Weller said to you, you know, about you need help here, like that kind of thing, and it's about that support, and as you just said as well with your wife, with the support and things like that. And I just, whenever you said that, I thought, well, maybe I do want to meet him now, like, you know, doing that. I mean, it's that support. You actually got that help, people there to look out for you.
But like, I didn't take it at the time. I took it for granted, as I said, because I was so much wrapped up in my own world. Like, let's have it right. The label is rock and roll's favourite magician. They don't want to see me sober, do they? That's what I thought. That's what I thought. So I remember, as I said, I remember going backstage with he saw me at the side. He called me in, and he jumped on and played a T-Rex cover with Miles Kane. Get It On, I think it was, and I remember it. Like, I'll never forget the whole situation going back there, and fucking probably God knows how much powder all over my fucking nose and all that. I'd done about 6 pints and a couple of Jack. I was gone. Do you know what I mean? I remember he looked at me and he just said, mate, like, maybe you need to slow down a bit. And the fact that, as I said before, that your hero's saying that to you proves that they care, because let's have it right. You know, he could have just not said anything, not even mentioned it. And the fact that he did proved to me just how much he cared and respected me as a human being. And when I finally did go down the road of sobriety, and I always tell him, you know, when I hit a milestone and all that, and he couldn't be prouder, because it's one of them things. It's one thing saying you're going to do it, and it's another thing actually doing it. And then I'm so wrapped up in it now that it is my lifestyle. I'm very careful who I hang around with, where I go. I like the old expression, you know, if you hang around the barbers enough times, you're going to get your hair cut, you know. I changed it one step further. I'm like, if you're going to hang around with a prostitute, you're going to end up fucking her, aren't you? Right? It's the same as if you go and end up in a bar, what are you going to do? You're probably going to end up drinking. I've got no intentions of, or I've got no real need to be in them situations anymore, unless I'm with friends and they know the crack. You know, because it used to be, I remember, right, fucking talking about it, this is going to open up everything. I remember doing a show, one of the first shows I ever did in London, and I was a week clean and sober. And I remember being in London in this dressing room, and everyone around me was drinking. And then there was this glass table, right, and there was still like a bit of paraphernalia from this band who played the night before, right? And there was one of these support bands got his card out and he's trying to fucking scrape it up and all that. And I was thinking, fuck me, was I like that? Like, I was looking at him going, what the fuck is going on, right? And then I remember they ended up getting a bit of gear out, and they looked and they were like, oh, do you want one? I was like, just looked at him and just left the room. Do you know what I mean? Because, like, I didn't want to put myself in that situation, but I don't know why that time it just clicked, rather than I mean, I've been to AACA, I've tried all these different meetings, and, in terms of recovery, it's probably been in recovery for maybe 6-7 years, but in terms of how long I've been clean and sober, it's coming up to 2. I tell you exactly what it is, because I keep it. I've got an app on here that tracks everything, because it gives me the motivation to you wake up and you're alive and you're clean and you're sober. It's a fucking amazing feeling, man. Let me tell you that. So my sobriety date is June the 30th, 2020 or 2022, right? So that's 876 days, or it's 2.39 years. So like 2 years and 3 months or something. I don't know, but like that is, or 28.7 months, or this has got hours and everything, mate. It's fucking unbelievable. 21,037 hours. Listen, I'm dyslexic. It don't matter about figures. There's it, but a lot, man. The fact that I can wake up and go. They always used to say, when you wake up, tell yourself you're not going to drink. Don't even have to tell myself that now, because I know I'm not going to. Like getting on the flight this morning, seeing people like drinking, like early doors. I thought, fuck, I used to do that, and I'm looking at it like I don't look at people and think, oh God, because that's their life. People are enjoying it. There's people, believe it or not, Ben, who can go out there and have 1 or 2 drinks and actually go home. And then there's people like me who can't have 1 or 2 drinks, forget where you live, and then you end up fucking all over the place, like on meeting people who have no real interest in you, apart from, oh, well, you've done this is interesting. Oh, and he's got drugs, we might as well stay with him. It's a load of bollocks, man.
Yeah, because there's within public health, I'm going to get all technical now, within public health, there's a model that we use, Prochaska and Dickelman's model, theory of change, the model of change. And it's just contemplation, things, I guess, whatever. But it goes around in a cycle, whatever. And yeah, people relapse. People come off the wagon, things like that. And there's all we can do is actually help support them. But the thing is, it's like what you were saying there. You went to AA, you did all this, whatever.
Yeah.
You bring a horse to water, you can't make it drink. And it's that kind of carrot on a stick. What is that moment? What is that thing that's on it going, not that's me done. And the beautiful thing that you just did there, you got out your carrot on the stick there. Yeah. You actually went, look at this, and you're proud as shit with that, which is brilliant, man. And that's gorgeous. It's beautiful. And so, to me, I'm taking off in here, the thing is around abstinence, about staying off the base. Because I've seen you in Dapper Laughs, like I said earlier, whenever you were saying you're at the Fulham game and your wife wasn't well back home, doing that, and I went, man. I have my head in my hands, it's going, it was just a mind blow
that's a low one. Like, there has been some fucking low moments, do you know what I mean? And like, I remember when her sister called me up and she was in hospital, and I put her on loudspeaker and people were around me, and the fact that their first initial reaction wasn't to say, oh, you better go home, it was, do you want another beer? It should have told me everything. But as I said to you see it through sort of like, is the expression rose-tinted glasses? Is that the expression? Right? You're looking at it so differently, right? She knows now that she can call me anytime. She can call me right now and I'll be there in a flash, mate. I wouldn't care how much it cost and where as long as I got there, it would happen. And she knows also that I have to live with that, what happened. Thank God nothing drastic did happen, because it didn't. But let's say something did, and where was I? On the piss. I mean, it was a fucking shit game anyway. They played Hull City, who you put the reserves out and fucking beat them. Do you know what I mean? And I had no interest in the game. All I wanted was a piss up. And I remember, right, I sent her a picture of, I was in the toilet, right. I remember sending her a picture of I think it was the Fulham programme, and right next to it was a bottle of Malibu that I fucking smuggled in, right. And then there was a rolled up note on my card, and she was like, I was like, I didn't even realise. I just sent this photo to her, right? And I'm like, I ain't doing myself any favours here, man. Do you know what I mean? Like, what the fuck are you doing? But like, me and her laugh about it now, because she knows how strong I am as a person now, and that I can. Let me tell you now, like 2.5 years ago, probably 3 years ago, I couldn't sit here and talk about, these stories, because one, it was embarrassing. But then the more I sort of understand this addiction, which it is, and the illness. I know that my story will click with people out there, and it might be the missing piece to their jigsaw. I have had, since opening up about the struggles, the amount of message. I could open my inbox on Twitter now, right, and Instagram, and how people got my number, fuck knows, probably off the back of a toilet door somewhere, right? But how people got my number and messaged me saying, you've inspired me, I want to do it. This bloke messaged me the other day, right? Let me try and find this. I'm not going to mention his name, but let me try and get this message out. He used to message me quite a bit, right, and say, I'm struggling. Any advice? And I was like, what are you struggling with and all this, And it's basically, I gave him advice that I think I would have liked to have heard, back in the day when I was sort of finding my way around this addiction. And he sent me a lovely message. I would like to find it. Sorry for... I'm trying to keep talking so it's not stunned silence, you know what I mean? Because it's very...
You're doing a good job, man.
I'm doing all right. Listen, as long as it stops you from talking, we're all right, aren't we? Right, here we go. Right, where is it? Right, so this guy, right, he messaged me and he was talking, and then he opened up. He said, Tuesday is my official 1 year off the booze, right? And I was looking back at the messages, right? And there's messages of me giving him advice. And look, he sent me a picture. He's 100 days sober, right? And look, there's 50. So he was sending me his milestones, right? And that's when I knew that my story is helping people, right? Now, there's also people out there and who sort of go, oh, you don't need to push it in people's faces, no one really cares. Listen, fuck up. I can't give a fuck about you or your life, the fact that you're saying that tells me more about you than it does about me. As I say, the reason I share the milestones and this story is because it helps me. And I will do everything that helps me stay on this fantastic, beautiful journey. And as I said, the fact that it's helped so many, and I mentioned that word a minute ago, illness. It is, but it's one of them illnesses people can't see. You don't look at someone and goes, he struggles with addiction, he struggles with alcoholism and that. You hear someone's dying of, God forgive me, the dreaded cancer, right? Immediately, as I remember hearing this in an AA meeting, immediately someone feels sorry for them because they're dying. But then you tell someone you're struggling with drinking drugs, oh, well, you can sort that out. No, but if it was that simple, there wouldn't be such things as AA, the big book and all that, Like, it isn't as simple. But I didn't realise that. I was in and out of these meetings. Thankfully, never got to rehab because it never, well... Of course, it got the missus to say, it did get bad. But, you say to yourself, it couldn't have if I didn't get to rehab. But it probably would have ended up going that way, the way I was going, because starts off 1 pint, 2 pint, 3, and you just keep going. There was I had no stopping. And, like, when you hear that, as it is, there's people out there. And, I always take a little moment to sort of think of the people out there who are struggling, because I knew where I was in the addiction. You feel like, fuck, this is a lonely place, man. Fucking lonely. Because in your head, let's have it right, you do the first drink, you have the first line, oh my God, this is amazing. And I remember sitting in the room once, and they said, oh, I never had a great time on drinking drugs. And I was like, mate, you should have fucking done it with me. Let me tell you that, right? Jesus Christ, I've seen some things, right? But it's like, then you're thinking, no, but everyone's experience is different. So you can't go around saying stuff like that. And I realised that early. And like I said, it took a while for something to sort of click in and go, this is the path you need to choose. But when it did click, fuck me, amazing, man.
So how do you maintain that abstinence when you're on tour? And you mentioned about, being with Paul Weller, and obviously he said to you, you need help. So you with, I'm not saying with Paul Weller, obviously he's an exception, but you're in that
environment.
Yeah, that is, you know, you said you were the rock and roll magician. You were expected to drink, do drugs, and everything else. How do you maintain that? You're on it. I think you're on day 8, 9 of your tour. How do you maintain that abstinence when you're amongst it? I guess
I just do the show and then fuck off, and that's the truth. Because I know as soon as I do what I've got to do, I haven't got to be in that venue, that room. Not saying I'd go straight away and be rude. No, people have paid to see you. People want to chat to you. Fantastic. But don't overstay your welcome. And let me tell you now, it's very, very easy to slip back into that old routine when people are coming around you telling you how good you are and, oh my God, you're amazing. You should be on the TV again. You should do this. You should do that. Then your guard could end up dropping, going, fuck. Yeah, I am that good. And as I keep on saying it, the thing that stops that guard is I fast forward. So how did I feel after one pint? Well, there never was one pint. It was endless. So, yeah, I also make it very clear to people early doors. I slip it in. I sort of say, oh, it doesn't really matter, but I don't drink. I just say it as a joke, rather than come across, again, I use this word arrogance because some people do think I'm an arrogant person, and I'm not. Sometimes I don't have confidence, so it probably comes across as arrogant, but I'd rather help other people than help myself, and that's where I was in the first time, because I was too busy helping other people and not taking my own advice. So nowadays I tell people straight away, I don't drink, I don't want this, I don't want that. I remember doing a festival in, I can't remember where it was, and it was, let me get this right, June, July, August, September, October, November. About 6 months into my recovery, right? And I was in my dressing room and I looked in my loads of crisps, brilliant chocolate, fucking brilliant, yeah. Red Bulls, Lucasades, opened the fridge and there was like 4 Carlsbergs in there, and I'm like, what the fuck? Do you know what I mean? And my dressing room next door was a well-known name who I know doesn't drink, so I overlooked him, and I ended up going to this other guy who was a poet, and he took the drinks off me straight away. And then he wanted to come into the dressing room and start drinking. I was like, listen, son, this ain't a fucking motel. Do you know what I mean? That ain't happening. I just can't have that, and I make it quite clear. The first full the main or the full tour I did, why being in recovery, was with the Brian Jonestown massacre. And Anton, who is a fucking genius, people can say whatever they want about him. I absolutely love the bloke. Funny enough, I was messaging him this morning because he's playing in Belfast, and he was asking me about the venue. I always check up on people. That's my thing. I always check up on people. I hadn't heard from him for a while, so I just dropped him a message, and then we're talking about the show. I love the guy, and I got a lot of respect for him. Like I have to, like have for everyone who's given me the opportunity to show my skills, talent, whatever you want to call it. That tour, I knew if I come out the back of that tour that this was it. I knew that, and it was the biggest test of my life, because, as I said to you, the Barrowlands is a place you can tick that off of your.
It's an iconic venue,
my
isn't
God,
it?
mate!
Yeah.
You walk through there, you can smell the history, you can see the history. You know, it's that iconic. Paul Weller wrote a song from the floorboards up about that. When he went back to his hotel room, he wrote that about the Barrowlands. And it's just, to say I've played there, you know what I mean? I could live off that for the rest of my fucking life, mate. But I don't want to, because I've got more in my locker that people need to see, and people need to hear the story. Not so much hear the story. You know, if people want to hear the story, they'll find it, because it's out there. But I want people to enjoy my magic and be entertained. And I knew, as I said a minute ago, if I come off the back of that tour, I knew this was the making of me. And I made sure my dressing room had no drink. And even Anton, I remember I opened up a can once. It was a can of Red Bull. And he quickly got up and he looked round. And I went, it's Red Bull. He went, okay, that's good, that's good. And I remember one time I opened up this... it was like a coffee, a Starbucks coffee, and he went, you don't need to do this, you don't need, no, please, don't go back there. And I was like, it's coffee, and he was like, so that, the fact that he had my back, right, and he is like an evil genius, because he's fucking, like, to be in that guy's, like, company is amazing, but to be on tour with him and on a tour bus for near enough a month, I love the guy, and you know, there's been a time, and it's very well documented, where he went through a stage of recovery and that, and I just think the guy is an absolute genius, like I do most people who I've been around.
Do you find it enlightening, since you've been sober, seeing who your true friends are and who ended up being your acquaintances?
Yeah, man. I mean, that's always one of them ones. I've got a good friend back home who he's someone I care about, and I feel sorry for him. He's got epilepsy, right? And there's been some times where, when I moved back to Belfast, I didn't hear from him. I thought, what the fuck's he? And then I found out he was in hospital because he had like a seizure and ended up in the hospital. And I was like, mate, you need to fucking stop this. But then he said, yeah, but you were doing it with me. And I was like, fuck, I know I was, but like, you need to stop, you know. And he's such a lovely kid, right? And I can see a lot of potential in him, and I can see, I do in everyone, man, do you know what I mean? But like, there is more to life. Like, I remember he always goes, yeah, well, we had a 3-day bender. Do you remember it started watching it started watching the DMAs on a Friday, and then we went and watched Fulham at like 11 o'clock. Who the fuck invented early kickoffs? Yeah, fucking prick, man. But I ended up doing an early morning kickoff with Fulham, watching that. And then I went to the boxing in London, and then it just 3 days on the piss, right? He's like, yeah, but I was all right for that. And I was like, yeah, but that's like saying walking across a minefield and walking across it once and saying you missed them all. And then the next time you do it, you might hit that mine that blows you up. That's the same with that. You're dicing with death. And I always do check in on him. And I love the kid, like I said. But there's a lot of friends who sort of, I don't hear from them because they've got nothing to really... like, I don't know, probably I've got no need because I don't drink anymore, you know, and that's the thing. I can count my friends probably my friends back home, probably on one hand, you know, and yeah, all right, of course it's sad. And a lot of people will say, well, it's your fault because you've changed and this and that. But it's not like that, because like, I remember like opening up with people once and saying I really do struggle, and you know, but we were still using and that, and I was like, it didn't help. So what, you know, I would never blank any of the people who I used to hang around with, although they probably think I do. I wouldn't, because they're my friends, and I love every single one of them, and I'm proud of, you know, the times we had together and the memories that will last long with me forever. But you know, the party has to end sometime, and for me it had to end on June the 30th 2022, because it just fucking had to. Do you know what I mean?
You know, you just made me think of a line there. Thick as thieves, some bonds are severed, others are made.
Yeah.
Like, you know, it's that kind of thing, moving on with it. I'm just going to ask one last question from me, and then I will shut up. And it's a terrible question.
Fuck's sake.
I'm going to ask you, are you glad you went through it? Are you glad all that happened for you to be where you are now?
That's not a terrible question at all. No one's ever asked me that. So let me, please, just... let me bear with me while I have the silence, and while I just think about that, because I've never, ever thought of that. Yeah. Off the top of my head, on the instant of you asking me that, I'm going to say yeah, because if it didn't happen, then it would have... it's going to sound so stupid by saying, well, it wouldn't have happened. Well, fucking no shit. If you don't buy a ticket to the lottery, you ain't going to fucking win, are you? But it's like... yeah, I am glad, because it made me the person who I am today, and it made me, you know, like fuck me, man, like my partner, my wife, is very proud. Yes, man, I am very glad, because the person I am today is someone who I'd be proud of as a role model, you know. And that's, again, not to be big-headed, but I know that when my son grows up, he didn't see me coming home stumbling along, fucking pissed up. And listen, I never did anything stupid. I never hurt anyone apart from myself. And I was putting my partner and my mum through a battle where they're saying, I remember, right, my mum telling me all she wanted was for me to stop drinking. Fuck, when your mum's saying that to you and you're still going out and saying, it's typical. I said, it's only going to be 1 or 2. Fuck me, what, 1 or 2 days? Like, 1 or 2 what? Like, it's mental. And then I remember sometimes I'd be in my room when I was with my mum, and I'd be listening to like music on YouTube. And then like I walk into her room at like 4 a.m. and go, Mum, look at this. A fucking laptop straight in her face. Like, look at this, the Jam Bingley Hall and that. Fucking amazing, get on that. And it's like, what the fuck was that? But me and my mum, I've got the most amazing relationship. I'm so glad that she's my mum, because no one else could have done a better job raising me than she has. And let's have it right, it was pretty much on her own. And I see how hard it is with our son. It's the most amazing thing being a parent, but it is hard as well. Like I met this guy the other day in Belfast, and he was telling me his partner did podcasts about being a parent and that, and he said, she clams it up, she doesn't say how fucking hard it is and that. And I was like, mate, get me on and I'll tell you, like, I won't cut. And it is hard, and at some days you are smashing your head against the wall going, what the fuck is going on here? But then what you have to remember is it is the most beautiful journey. And if I didn't go through what I did go through, I probably would be very naive and probably would be in the pub every other day. But the fact that now I'm moulding my son into the most beautiful, amazing kid, it's incredible, to know that his future's sort of in mine and his mum's hands, because what we show him, the path that we show him, is how he will end up later on in life. And the love I have for that little boy, fuck me, man, like mental. Didn't think I could love anyone as much as I love my mum and my partner. But fuck me, when that kid come along, man. Jeez. Oh, Jesus.
Do you think that was the final part of the jigsaw for you really wanting to go down that road of sobriety, do you think? Him coming along and being a dad and realising what that does to you as a person?
Not when he first come along, because I was still wrapped up in I'm rock and roll's favourite magician, and it took me a while. And I remember having him in my arms one day, and I thought, fuck. And I remember my partner saying, because it was this one time I was in Wales and I did this show, and I rang her must have been about 60, 70 times. She was in bed. She had work the next day in the hospital, and I was ringing her and she didn't answer, and then I woke her up. I remember I turned my phone off and answered it the next day, and there's all these messages, and it was the biggest wake-up call. She doesn't have to tell me. I know how much she loves me, and I remember this one thing that she says. She said, because I said, like, why did you sort of, because I was a bit of a party animal, like, what, with her as well, and I was like, why did you sort of, I don't know, like, stay with me? And she said, because I could see so much better for you. And she said, I knew that I was good for you. And I was like, fuck me. And then she said, you were worth fighting for as well. Because, I mean, if you've got someone you're with for the rest of your life saying stuff like that, mate, you can't be nasty or be horrible to her. I mean, that's not saying we don't argue. Listen, everyone who lives together argues, mate. And her being from Northern Ireland, she's got a fucking temper. Let me tell you, when she revs up like a 4 Cortina on a winter morning, mate. Let me tell you that. Like,
Irish as well. Like,
fuck, honestly, mate, Jesus Christ, you light a fire with that, mate. I'm telling you. But I wouldn't have her any other way. Do you know what I'm saying? And it needed her to be real, like, harsh on me and give me the biggest reality kick of I could lose everything before it sort of kicked in. And life is fucking amazing, and to put it into perspective, you could you can meet someone and they could be the happiest person in the world, right? You don't know what's going on in their life, right? But next thing you know, you get chatting to them and you find out that they've only got like 5 months to live, for argument's sake, right? Yeah. And then there's you on the other side who fit and healthy, but you're going out and you're pissing it up the wall and you're sniffing all these fucking weird substances. So there's someone there who has got a sort of like a tick. There's a clock on their life, and then there's you, who is abusing every part of your body for the sake of a fucking party. And then there's someone who can't control what's happening to them, and they're the most happiest person in the world. And I don't know what made me bring that sort of story up. It's something that it was in my head, and it just clicked, because I remember early on in the recovery, I met this woman, and she was dying of cancer, and fuck me, she was the most loveliest person. I can't for the life of me remember her. It was in Crawley, and she was part. No, I ain't got time. I'd ring my mum up and she'd fucking tell me the name. But this woman was. She was just like one of them. She could light up a room. You know what I mean? And then I sort of, as I said, this was early on in the recovery, and I thought that's what life's about: living every day as if it's your last, right? But then I'm sort of contradicting myself and going, well, you shouldn't be living every day as if it's your last, blah, blah, blah. But then it's like, this woman doesn't know, you know, when she's sort of going to get taken away from us and that. And sadly, she did. I think it was a little bit longer than what she expected, but then when the final curtain come down on her, but it was like, I remember just sitting next to her and talking up Tilgate Park for hours. It was literally hours. And then my mum come along, because we always used to walk around the park, and like sitting next to this woman and just listening to her and that. And you think, why would you want to self-destruct something when people are out there who don't have the sort of, help me out here with the word, they haven't got the time, and they haven't got the sort of what we've got. We've got everything where we could go, where we could do this, we could do that, but they haven't got. They don't know what they're going to do in next year. Don't even know if they're going to be there. And then there was me fucking abusing it, and that was another reason which led me onto the road, is seeing this woman, because I thought, I've got a chance here. You know, my actions would speak for themselves whether I live or die. She hasn't got a choice. And it really did fucking make me think, big time.
So you say it was a friend of your mum's, or just a chance encounter almost?
This was a lady, my mum speaks to everyone. She does, man. Like, we go around the park and she, oh, hello, Sue, and all this and that. I was like, who's that? Don't know. But I see her walking and I know her name. Like, do you know what I mean? My mum is a very lovely person to have that sort of skill where she could go into a room and speak to anyone. And that's a beautiful thing to have. Do you know what I mean? You could just go up to anyone and start speaking to them. And that's how we met this woman. She used to go up to the park and she used to sit by the lake. And maybe she was reflecting, and maybe she just wanted to speak to random people. I don't know. But I remember speaking to her, and it was just, yeah, it just made me open up. Like, it made me think of things so differently. And I haven't told that story before, because just out of respect for her as well, really, because I didn't want to sort of people to say that I've used her story as a sort of momentum or a motivation for my recovery. But it was, man, you know, to meet someone like that who, as I said,
do you believe in fate?
I do. I'm not a religious person, you know that. My religion is Fulham Football Club and the Jam, honestly, mate. And my God is Paul Weller and Marco Silva. Touchy subject being in Liverpool, though, innit? Eh?
Ben, thank you so much for sharing, and the people, I guess, who've inspired you and have helped you through, your journey, and for sharing that for us. But one thing for me, finally, you mentioned that someone had followed you and they kept up about their journey and their recovery. And I'm just thinking, we've talked in this podcast about, I guess, the challenges of working in the entertainment industry, the temptations. You know, you said yourself about you were the rock and roll's favourite musician, so it's living up to that. And you've articulated that really well. What advice would you share with anyone in the same way that Paul Weller noticed it for you? What would you share for someone that you know, if you felt that they were having a problem, what steps to take? What advice would you give?
There was a guy I met last week at the Peter Hook show, and he went up to me and gave me a big hug and said, "Fuck, man, you're doing really well off the drink." And that, he said, "I'd love to be able to do it." I said, "But you can." No, I can't. No, listen to me, you can. No, you don't understand. Listen, let me tell you now, I understand more than you think I know. Let me tell you something now, my advice to people are, if you say to yourself, you're going to go sober for a month, that'll scare you. If you say you're going to go sober for a year, forget about it. It is so simple. You wake up and you say you're not going to use or you're not going to drink today, and that's it. For instance, you wake up and say, today I might listen to The Jam, for argument's sake. There are other bands available, but, they are my favourite one. Exactly that, man. Not as good. For instance, right, here's another example, right? This is off the top of my head. This is how mad my head works sometimes. It's raining outside. I'm not going to go outside, for argument's sake, right? Wake up and say to yourself, you're not going to drink. If you've got a load of cans in the bit, because my mum never had drink in the house, but I used to hide it. I found a fucking bottle of Buckfast a couple of months ago found a bottle of Buckfast underneath the bed, right? There was down there was no tissues or nothing like that, right? But there was a couple of old vinyls, and I put my hand there, I picked up this bottle, I was like, that's getting fucked off out, right? But if you're stashing drink and that around the house, ain't going to help you, is it? I purposely, when I'm in supermarkets, don't walk past the alcohol section because I've got no need to be there. And I say this, my advice to people is stop doing what you're doing and expecting to see a change, because that is the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over again and not seeing a change. And I could also say to you, you may be enjoying your life now, but thinking you've got a problem. The fact that people come up to me and say, "Oh, I don't know if I've got a problem," I say, let me stop you there. The fact that you've even said that, it tells me that you do, because someone who can manage having a drink doesn't go up to people and say, "I think I've got a problem." They just go, "I can have a little drink now and then." Do you know what I mean? So you've come to me and you've told me. Advice is, believe that you can do it, because you can. You are stronger than you would ever imagine. And just believe in the procedure. It's hard. Like the first week, Jesus Christ. Sorry if I'm going on, by the way, but the first week, it was hard. The second week was even harder. The third week, starting to find a little bit of momentum where I'm going, right, I know what I've got to do now. The first month, brilliant. Good friend of mine, Russell Hastings, fantastic musician as well. He's in from the Jam, and then he's brought out his own stuff with Bruce. He told me, he said, "You get to that year, Ben, let me tell you, that is a safety net." I said, right. I got to the year, I finally felt like I had a safety net there. It was fucking mad. I couldn't wait, knowing when I went to bed, when I woke up, I was a year sober. The most amazing feeling. My wife, well, she was my fiance. No, she was my. It doesn't matter. She was with me, right? She bought me a cake, got me a one badge. My mum got me a card, and I thought, people care. People love this, right? It's the most fucking amazing thing ever, and it is so good to wake up knowing that you're clean and sober, and knowing that you're not going to wake up with a headache and all this. And I'm more creative now than I've ever been. And that is the truth. And I don't want people to listen to this saying that I'm sort of preaching, because it isn't. As I say, there's people listening who might think I'm chatting a load of shit, and there's probably people listening who can really relate to it. My message would be, me talking about my journey helps me more than people think it does. Do you know what I mean? Because the more I talk about it, go, shit, what a prat you were back then. And it reminds me of not going back down that route. So that's why I tell my story. And if there is people out there who it inspires to go down this path, then I'm happy. But that's not why I'm doing it.
Ben, thank you so much for the advice, but also for sharing your story. Thank you so much.
Not a problem at all.
And next we've got Walter will be joining us, and we'll be talking to Walter Tasosa about his research and interest into addiction and around alcohol.
You're listening to the Men's Mental Health Podcast, The Man Hug.
Okay, it's this part of the podcast now where us, the hosts, normally have a discussion around the theme and the topic. But for this episode, we've got a special guest. We have got one of our colleagues, Dr. Walter Tasosa. So, Walter, welcome to the Man Hug.
Yeah, welcome. Thank you for inviting me.
It's really nice to have you. So Walter's background is working predominantly with people within the alcohol sort of space, isn't it, Walter?
Yes.
Yeah, so what we thought would be really useful would to basically do a bit of a Q&A with an expert and get a little bit more information around alcohol and alcoholism through our colleague Walter. So the first big question we wanted to sort of ask was, when does drinking alcohol become an addiction? When's that sort of like that fine line, Walter?
Right. Drinking becomes an addiction when the drinking transitions from that occasional social drink to becoming compulsive. And when it gets to the point where it starts to interfere with your daily life. So this progression is really typically over a long period of time. And then we start to see physiological, physical, and also behavioral signs starting to emanate in the person. And you can see some indicators that someone is getting addicted by, for example, their increased tolerance to the use of alcohol. They would need more alcohol in order to get the same effects. Then we have the social consequences of it. You would see that the alcohol is having an impact on the person's life, social life, and it results in a lot of other social consequences like problems with relationships and the like. So we have a couple of key indicators that tell us that there's a possibility that the drinking has progressed to an addiction.
Wow, okay, that's really interesting. One of the things we always sort of try to focus on the Man Hug as well is what happens to the brain. So in terms of someone who becomes addicted to alcohol, is there certain things within the brain that are more prevalent for addiction?
Yes, alcohol does have a massive effect on how the brain operates. We chemically, at a chemical level, we have what are called neurotransmitters. And with regards to alcohol, we have three specific neurotransmitters that are affected by our drinking. And that's dopamine. Dopamine, normally called the reward pathway. So with alcohol, when we consume alcohol, dopamine is released, and it results in a pleasurable feeling in the person. So that affects the brain in that the person would want to continue to drinking in order to continue to have that pleasurable feeling. Then we have what's called GABA. It works hand in hand with what is called glutamate. So it's called the glutamate GABA system, whereby the glutamate causes an excitatory feeling, whereas the GABA causes an inhibitory feeling. So alcohol actually reduces the amount of GABA in the brain, so it becomes inhibitory. But when you start to drink over a long period of time, that system can be reversed, and alcohol starts to actually cause that excitatory feeling in the person, which then results in withdrawal symptoms like anxiety, tremors, and the like. So that's how the brain, alcohol actually affects the way the brain operates at a chemical level.
Wow, it's so interesting. Yeah.
It's interesting that, Walter, because that whole thing that you said, it's from occasional to then becoming absolutely, a need to compulsive. I guess it's prevalent within our culture, isn't it? For drunk, we associate so many things with, cheers. We say cheers even if we haven't got alcohol.
Yes.
So when do you think that, in terms of the problem, then it becomes a problem that people perhaps don't recognise it? That sort of slippery slope, because of what you said there, that occasional
you speak to people, oh, I've not got a problem, but I drink every day. It's who you it's a social thing. So when does that, is that an issue in terms of that, when the danger in terms of alcohol consumption, when it becomes that necessity?
Yeah, with alcohol, sometimes it's so difficult to tell when it becomes a problem, and it's also culturally led sometimes. It's also led by the way we are normalized, we are socialized in the way we have grown up. But yes, in some cultures, for example, the way they perceive that alcohol is becoming a problem is when the person's day-to-day activities, their what is expected of them by their society becomes affected. For example, a study that I conducted way back in 2019 that focused on Zimbabwean migrants living in the UK, that was done using ethnographic methods, where I interviewed several Zimbabwean migrants who had migrated into the UK from the 90s onwards, and the way they perceived that alcohol is becoming a harm is not related to how much a person drinks, because we've got guidelines from the chief medical officer who tells us that this is considered to be at least safe drinking limits. They look at alcohol harm from the point of view of that it does not matter how much you drink, it becomes a problem if it's starting to interfere with what is expected by your family, for example. So which means that if a husband, for example, is expected to make sure that the fridge there's food all the time in the fridge, that the kids are going to school and being picked after school, and all those responsibilities, then there's no problem with one's drinking. So the problem with looking at it in that way is that the consequences then become to be seen later on in the person's life, not then, because they will be drinking heavily over a long period of time because they will be functioning well. So in that respect, from a cultural perspective, we see that the way we perceive what alcohol harm is can be different, you see. Yeah. And we obviously, apart from just being cultural, we also have that machoistic, there's that feeling in men that, drinking is considered to be machoistic, and therefore we see that, there's an expectation from peers that, you're supposed to drink and drink, and you can be looked down upon by your peers if you are the first one to say you're going home. And I also saw that it also was my finding in that research that I conducted, where men were saying that they can feel pressured into drinking more because they feel that it is what is expected by their peers. And so that can become a problem in that respect.
How common is it then in the UK? You've mentioned that it probably affects more men than women from what you've said then, and that's maybe a cultural thing. Is there any other people that are more prone or vulnerable, more likely to be affected? How common is it in terms of facts and figures?
Yes, social deprivation is a key issue when it comes to drinking. We find that there's more harmful drinking in the more deprived communities compared to the more affluent ones. For example, there's what we call postcode deprivation. So if we consider drinking levels, or even the amount of alcohol that is sold in the, those postcode areas which are considered to be deprived areas, we find that there's more harmful drinking in those areas. So certainly there's a direct relationship between poverty and the level of drinking. And there was a study that was conducted, I think, way back in 2020 as well, which brought out the fact that if two men of different socioeconomic status drink the same amount of alcohol, the one from a more deprived community would tend to be affected more by alcohol compared to the other person. So which means there are other factors that come into the interplay here in terms of perpetuating the harm that alcohol causes to society. Then we also find gender differences probably you are aware of that as well, that men tend to drink a lot more compared to women. A lot of theories around why that happens, but again, for example, in the UK, it has always been cultural that men tend to drink more than women. I know that in the 90s, for example, you walk into a pub, into a Wetherspoons pub or something like that, you would find men having a pint and women having half a pint, drinking together. Like that could be husband and wife or partners. But you don't tend to see that anymore because obviously culture and ways of doing things change over time, isn't it? Yeah.
Okay. I've got 2 questions written down here, but you more or less kind of answered one already.
Yes.
It was talking about the issue regarding, this is a men's health podcast.
Yes.
But obviously a lot of we've got female listeners, across the board, it is quite open and broad. But as we did state there, as you actually said, men are the greater number of those who actually become reliant on alcohol. You given reasons for that? You're actually talking around that. So can you think of anything else, why this is? Is it purely cultural?
Yes. Actually, there's some theories that indicate that men have got more water content in their bodies, so they can tolerate more alcohol. So they drink more, which then leads to addictions and then problems later on. But again, I think the main thing here is the cultural element, the issue that it has always been an expectation that men, drink more. But we find that, again, with regards to how prone we are to addiction, there are other studies that also indicate a genetic element to it. To say our genetic predisposition as men places us in a more vulnerable position to developing addictions compared to women. So it's not just the drinking itself, the level of drinking, but it's also the genetic predisposition. That if a man and a woman were to drink the same amount of alcohol, genetically as men, we are more predisposed as well, and therefore at more risk of developing addictions.
That's really interesting. You kind of come into these things thinking, I've got an idea, and it's just blew me away, doing that.
Yeah, and we know that, with men, they tend to be less health-seeking compared to women. Yeah. And alcohol can be used more as a self-medicating measure. Yeah. And we find a lot of men even drinking in isolation. So it becomes not something that is social. It becomes a self-medication way of life in order to deal with the stresses associated with life. And therefore, in that respect, men are also predisposed as well, or at more risk of developing addictions compared to women, who are more likely to seek for help compared to men as well.
Spot on, and like I said, through your own research, have you actually noticed that there are certain men who actually would take more of a risk, becoming addicted to alcohol? Are there certain groups?
Yes. Yes.
We don't want to tar people. We don't want to stereotype or anything like that.
Yes, we don't want, because this is just how the picture looks overall. Yeah. But it's not indicative of the fact that because you are of this socio-economic characters, and therefore this is what it is. But generally what we do know is that there's certainly a link between deprivation and the amount of alcohol that we drink. It could be because of several factors. It could be, for example, lack of health promotion initiatives that target certain populations, and therefore that message around the harmful effects of drinking does not reach those that might need it. Then we also have ethnic minorities as being vulnerable as well because of their experiences in living in societies where they may not be acculturated, where maybe they may be missing their families back home. They've probably come from far away, and therefore, and also the perceived, I'm using the term perceived here, the perceived conception by some migrants that they are racially at risk. I mean, racially what word could I use? They are more, they don't get the same, what's this, in life compared to the country into which they've settled, opportunities, that's the word, sorry. And therefore that leads them to drinking more as a way of coping with the stresses associated with settling into a new community, into a new country. Yeah.
Wow, that's really interesting. Yeah. I just wanted to touch on a thing there, Walter, which is really interesting, because obviously, you mentioned about maybe those that are struggling financially, and these can be at a high risk as well. But one of the things that we do see, and I think, from my time working in the community, we can also have what might be classed as functioning alcoholics, in the sense they could be high flying jobs, your doctors, your lawyers,
yes,
all of these people, but like it's probably less stigma attached with that, would you say? Because they are functioning in that sense, that they're working in an environment like that.
Yes, yeah. The term functional alcoholics is used sometimes, isn't it? And we know that there is a lot of problems related to addictions in the more higher socioeconomic status, but as you rightly said, they tend to not be as stigmatized as we see in people from the more deprived areas in the country. Yes,
you always see it in the media, don't you? If there's like a drama or a TV program, and the detective or the lawyer or the doctor, they come home and the first thing they do is a big glass of whiskey or something, and it's like,
then it's kind of glorified, isn't it?
Out of a decanter, hardly a can of super powers or something, but but it's really interesting how sort of media portrays that, I think, and it doesn't sort of like say, do you know what, this is actually a problem. You're drinking 7 days a week, just because of your status,
Yes, and also apart from deprivation levels, we tend to think that drinking is more in men who are younger, like in the 20s to 30s. We are starting to see a change as well in drinking levels in the older adults. So people tend to think that there's no addictions in, say, the over 65s. Yet there's a problem there as well. The loneliness, for example, is a key issue in driving more drinking in those that are in pensioners, for example, because obviously, as the family grows, we know that parents tend to be left on their own, and loneliness then becomes a driver there in drinking. So I read a paper only a couple of weeks ago which actually indicates that there's an increase in the in risky drinking in the over 65s in the UK, and that trend has been growing over the past 10-20 years.
Wow, that's really interesting. Yeah. Ian?
It's interesting, isn't it? Because we have that. You're saying about that being culturally driven, and it's that whole thing, isn't it, about having a bit of Dutch courage, isn't it, before you do something, and it's totally acceptable, isn't it, for that? So when do you think then, you talked about a lot of the who's vulnerable, the problems, and that, that slippery slope, I guess, in terms of, when it becomes a problem, where in terms of accepting help, what is the, how important is it to get help for that when it's recognised as a problem, or you recognise that this is just getting out of hand?
Yes.
What's the issues with that, around that?
I think when it comes to addictions, it's so important that individuals or men do ask for help as soon as it's possible. But the barrier here is the stigma associated with alcohol. I remember when I was doing what I called audit assessments using alcohol use disorders identification test to measure the level of drinking in Sheffield. It was called for the Sheffield Care Commissioning Group. We would certainly find that men would not complete the audit openly as women would do, for example. So they would tend to minimize their drinking.
That's really interesting.
Because of the stigma
Yeah.
associated with alcohol. And you find that for a lot of research where you disseminate survey questions to men, you find that the amount of people that actually respond to them are minimal compared to, say, women, because of the stigma that's associated with drinking. So yes, that stigma affects people from going for help, yet is so important. The problem with alcohol, and in terms of the services we provide to help people with addictions, is that the person has got to come forward and indicate that they are having a problem. And if that does not happen, then it really becomes difficult to get the help that you require. And therefore, we would really need families, friends, to be supportive and understanding of a person who is struggling with their alcohol, and find ways of driving them to seek for help. And indeed, we've got a lot of help available. There's a lot of help that a person can get in order to nip the problem in the bud before it starts developing into an addiction.
Okay. So was it, as I said there earlier, it is a men's podcast, whatever, but lots of people listen to it, whatever. So just to talk about people in general, like, if people do need to get help, can you suggest, have you any idea, or where would you suggest any local, national charities, NHS support to actually get help for their addiction? Yeah,
there are several areas where you could actually go to seek for help outside just your GP as the first point of call. And then your GP would then be able to signpost you to a relevant service that suits your needs. We have got alcohol support networks as well available that work hand in hand with other organizations to support people who are struggling with their drinking. For example, we've got the NHS support areas who provide rehabilitation, who provide counseling and cognitive behavioral therapy services for people struggling with alcohol. And we also have group therapies as well as self-help, motivational interviewing groups as well. Yeah. So the NHS is doing a lot in terms of, providing services and support for people who are struggling with alcohol. But apart from that, we also have third-party sectors, Alcohol Change UK, which provides a lot of information about where to go and what the effects of alcohol are and all that. And we also have other groups like Alcoholic Anonymous, which uses what's called the 12 steps to abstinence. And, it focuses on abstinence more than anything else. And as I said earlier on when we're having that discussion, we have groups like Drink Wise, Age Well, which focus on responsible drinking and drinking within what are called safe drinking limits as prescribed by the Chief Medical Officer of the UK.
That's brilliant. That's so useful. Thanks for that, Walter. I think it's important to highlight, isn't it, that alcohol, it's just a behaviour at the end of the day. It's an outcome, isn't it? It's an end product. There's always a thought first, and then there's a feeling, and then there's the behaviours as well. So getting that help, and especially for things like talking therapies, is so important and valuable, isn't it?
It is so important. Yeah, it is so important because alcohol, in as much as smoking also, for example, causes a lot of harm to health, alcohol is a bit different because it affects families. It has got a massive socio-economic impact on individuals as well as their families, which makes it really important that a person seeks help, because the repercussions of one person go beyond just that person. And I think we would be a healthier society if we could get more help and seek more help because of the way that alcohol decimates and plays that, has that domino effect on a lot of people around that person.
Just on that point, especially like family or loved ones, if you were concerned about someone, often people think, I don't know if I'm well equipped to have that conversation with them and say, I'm concerned about you. What types of things can people do, if they are worried about someone, rather than cornering them and saying, oh God, I think you've got a problem with drinking or what have you?
Yeah. I've known of like family members who would, for example, get the drink off their loved one and throw it away, which could actually be a danger, really. It's sometimes done with all good faith because they are so concerned about their loved one. But, with alcohol, it has got to be managed really well. Otherwise, you could actually cause more harm to the person whom you are trying to help, because that can lead to massive withdrawal symptoms, and then that can lead into seizures that could actually end the person's life. So the most important thing for a family member, a friend who is living with someone with alcohol, is to talk to them, in such a way that they realize that there is help out there. Easier said than done, but I think that's the best way to approach a person who is struggling, to understand that it's one of the strongest addictions that we have. In fact, I've got a friend of mine that I worked with who said if alcohol was discovered today, it would be a controlled substance. He works in addictions, and he said certainly it would either be a controlled substance or a banned substance, in the way he was seeing the effects of alcohol on society in comparison to other addictive substances that we have.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Anyone have any questions they'd like to ask Walter?
Well, it's not really a question, it's more just a statement. It just makes me, it's these pressures of alcohol, because you go to someone, you're out with someone, out with a group, wherever. Oh, Conleth, we're shooting up loads of heroin here. Do you want some? No, I'm okay. That's fine. We're taking loads of lines of cocaine. Do you want any? No, I'm fine. I'm okay.
Who are you hanging out with?
Hang on.
I've not been out with him for ages.
We're going out for a couple of drinks. Do you want some? No. Why not? What's wrong with you? Yeah, it's this pressure, because I've been to parties before, house parties, and I've actually done it on the slide. I've actually brought non-alcoholic beers to whatever, and they wouldn't know. Next thing, they clocked on and they hit it on me. Yeah, doing this. No, you have to drink. It's that kind of thing, and it's this. Alcohol's one of those things where you have to apologise for not drinking. That's one of the problems I have.
Yeah, definitely.
I just thinking, what's wrong with you? Are you on medication or?
Definitely. Yeah. But again, just to add on that, with regards to what we do is to help people that are struggling with alcohol, is for them to understand the levels of drinking that is considered to be harmful and not. We've got what are called the Chief Medical Officer's Guidelines, who stipulate that if you have to drink, you should not drink more than 14 units a week. It used to be 21 units for men and 14 for women, and they've brought it to 14 units a week. But that does not indicate that it's safe. It's better, because no amount of alcohol is safe at all. That's the new guideline. Any amount of alcohol is harmful to us, but if we have to drink, we should not drink more than 14 units a week. And also, with that 14 units a week, you are better off having them over a protracted period of time within that week. And if you have to binge drink, for example, try and have alcohol-free days as well. 3 to 4 alcohol-free days, because a person might say, I would have those 14 units in just 2 days. Well, if that happens, that's really harmful. Binge drinking as well, even more harmful than having to spread even drinking more than that 14 units. So people sometimes misunderstand the fact that having those 4 units in one sitting is more harmful than probably having 20 units over a long period of time. So that's also important, I think, to understand what are called safe levels of drinking.
That's really interesting, but it's so informative. I think we want to thank you for coming on to this segment, Walter, because I've learned a lot during this session. It's been a lesson for me, so I'm hoping a lot of the people that are listening taken a lot from it as well, but also take that guidance and that advice for if you are struggling, or to have that conversation with someone. I think the main thing we can take from this is what Walter's saying. There is a lot of help out there, and the best thing you can do is just support someone and try and have that conversation and let them know that there is an awful lot of help and support out there. That's the key thing, really. But once again, thank you so much, Walter.
Thank you for inviting me. It was a
Amazing.
pleasure.
Thank you.
Okay.
We're going to have a very short break, and then we've got Sam, who's coming up from the Damien John Kelly House.
You're listening to the Men's Mental Health Podcast, The Man Hug.
Okay, it's this part of the Man Hug now where we shine a spotlight on a local service, and we're really thrilled that we're joined by Sam Batley. Sam is a photographer, a poet and an author, and he's also a former resident at Damien John Kelly House. And Damien John Kelly House is going to be our feature today. We're going to talk about this with the theme being abstinence. So Sam, welcome to the Man Hug.
Nice one, dude, mate. Thank you.
Really nice to have you here. So for those that don't know, just tell us a little bit about Damien John Kelly House, what it is.
Damien John Kelly House is a recovering living centre for men in Wavertree. It bases its recovery around arts, sport and culture. And yeah, it's quite a unique place. Everything is orientated around community. The art, sport and culture supplement like a therapeutic programme, which allows lads to take part, to have a go at things that we've not had opportunity to have a go at. There's a really strong culture there, a culture of open-mindedness, willingness and honesty.
Wow. Sounds incredible. It sounds unique compared to other kinds of drug and alcohol support that's out there as well. So how did it help you?
It's helped me innumerably, really. Like, it's quite a difficult thing to kind of like quantify. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's like it's helped me massively. So like before I moved to Liverpool, my life was incredibly different to what it is now, and it's different now because living there. And I lived in Damien John Kelly House for just over 2 years. Yeah. So in that 2 years, I've kind of seen the place like achieve the culture that Jackie and PJ like set out to achieve, and I've been grateful enough to play a role in that as well. So when I arrived in Damien John Kelly House, I was shot through, to be honest. I was scared to death. I'd only been to Liverpool twice before. Once to go to Liverpool Psych Fest, and then once the time after that was to meet PJ. Right. So I met PJ about 6 months before I moved here. And I just could not get my head around him. Yeah. Could not get my head around that, like, because he were abstinent. And there's this fella who's into all this good stuff. His life looks really good. He's happy, he's positive. And I'd not met a man like that. Not met a man that were like that, or like communicated, or like talked like he were talking. And that he'd go to festivals and he'd go to gigs and he'd write stories and he'd perform. I'd be like, I couldn't comprehend it. So the time after that, when I came, I moved in, and yeah, I was super, super nervous, super scared, you know what I mean? But like on that first night when I put my head down, I was like, it felt different. It felt like I was doing something very different to what I'd done in past. Another thing on that first day when I did my assessment, when I got there, PJ says to me, it's a myth that you need drugs and alcohol to be creative. And that's been like a really important message that I keep coming back to. Do you know what I mean? Because I found out through like applying myself that's incredibly true. It's helped me like figure out who I am. Or before coming to house, I'd were in a cycle of just moving. I'd leave home, go and live somewhere for like 6 months, a year, and then I'd come back home, and I was just in that loop for probably about 11 years. So every time that pattern repeated, it'd be like I'd just be putting another mask on. And that process of putting mask over mask over mask, I'd lost my sense of self, lost like my identity. And Damien John Kelly House provided a space for me to find that, to find what was at the base of all the stuff that I've been trying to hide from.
Wow, that's really powerful, and it's a true testament to obviously to Damien John Kelly House, but yourself for going through that program and sticking with it and wanting to get there. When you look back now, what was the point where you went, actually, do you know what, I need to do something about this, and I need to go to somewhere like Damien John Kelly House? Was it a multitude of things, or was it just like one significant moment?
It was like a bit of a mix, to be honest, but there were like gradual things that were happening in my life leading up to moving there. So that pattern that I've just described of like coming home thinking it's shit at home, it's everybody else's fault why I'm like I am, it's the job, it's the town, it's the place, it's my mum, it's my dad, it's this, whoever I'm seeing, and then leaving and finding exact same externals that are causing me to leave the place I've moved to come back home. On the last like repetition of that cycle, I was like labouring with a fella, and on first day I worked with him, put a line out, and I kind of knew in that moment, I was like, oh, this is going to get messy, this. So I worked with him for about 9 months, and yeah, like, we're using every day, drinking every day. And in that, like, experience, people started to pull away from me. People that I cared about pulled away from me. The consequences of, like, my actions and behaviours started to like stack up, and the pattern couldn't repeat itself because I couldn't get out of it. I was stuck in like a 24-hour loop of like waking up, going to work, getting paid on day, spending everything that I've earned on day, going back to work again. And I can remember thinking to me, saying, I've gone out with dog, and I can remember thinking to me, saying, like, this is it. Like a really like solemn acceptance that this was my life, and this was going to be my life, because there were no outside of me to compare it to be like, how could it be any different to this? This is where it's got me. Do you know what I mean? And yeah, Toria, PJ's partner, I met her, and I was getting like all excuses, it's my mental health, or it's this and it's that, and she put it like bang on me. She was like, she said that it's my relationships at drinking, and it knocked me for 6 because it was true, and I couldn't like respond. And that was about 4 months before I moved here, 5 months maybe. I can't remember the period of time, but that was like a big moment. This moment of feeling that there is no escape now. This is it, and then. The big moment come. I've been on like a bender, been on like a big bender, and in this bender, I'd not took my contact lenses out for like 6 days, so I couldn't see. Basically, I got a savage eye infection, and I come back home, and when I come back home after this bender, all my family were in the house. I thought that they were like having an intervention, and I thought, oh. I'm going to have to go and hide in field or something and, like, see if this passes. Anyway, I went in. They weren't having an intervention. I just got in bed, and I can just remember just feeling absolutely atrocious, loads of shame, and I've been in that situation loads of times before, and just got straight back into the loop, and because I had this eye infection, I couldn't get into the loop. I couldn't go back to work, and because I couldn't go back to work, I couldn't get back on it basically. And in that time and not being able to get on it, I had to sit with myself, and after about 3 days, my head snapped, and I went to go and kill myself. I don't know if that would have happened or if I'd have got there, but them kind of thoughts that I'd had for ages in this moment suddenly became much louder than what they had done. So I walked up Woods, and as I walked up Woods, I got the phone call from Toria, and that's kind of when I accepted it. She put me onto PJ. That's how I heard about Damien John Kelly House, and that's when the penny dropped. The penny dropped, and I kind of surrendered that if my life is going to get any better, then I can't keep doing it in a way that I think is best. I'm going to have to listen to other people with more experience. I'm going to have to do what they suggest, and he said, "Yeah, we've got this new place. There's a room for you on this Monday. It's yours if you want to come." So that I'd come.
Yeah.
So from that moment in field, 4 days after, I were in Liverpool, and it's been the best thing that I've ever done. It not only that my life's better now, but that level of acceptance and honesty with me, saying that this thing that I've thought has been my solution to life for the majority of my life is not doing me any favours at all, and what it's actually doing is taking me out of life. And I really grabbed onto what they were trying to do, what Jackie and PJ were trying to do. They've got a program, a weekly program there with different experiences or people. There'll be exercise on there, there'll be cultural events on there. We'll go to theatre, we'll go to plays, we'll go to gigs, and I just started saying started saying yeah to everything that I could say it to, and with a place like that, there's becomes a lot of opportunities where you can say yeah to stuff, because there's this provision of experiences, and a culture that supports it, basically.
Yeah. It's amazing. One of the things that I found really interesting there about your own story was, how you said you were working, was it for 9 months, but you were sort of using every day as well. And I think that's one of the things that, again, doesn't really get spoken about too much, does it? When you're kind of functional, you're doing a job and you're working and you're doing things, but that there's this problem that's happening every day, because I think there's quite a lot of stigma around addiction, and a lot of people may presume that people who aren't working are addicts, or or people who are homeless are addicts and things, but it can be just as bad for people who, as you say, put that mask on and they're kind of trying to function as best that they can as well, really.
Yeah, I think with that, when I put myself back in that perspective of being out with dog and what I've just described there, that acceptance that this is it. I think I have a lot of empathy for that bit of myself, because it's I was still doing my best, and I think it's easy to give myself bastard for how I were, what I did, and there is bits of my behaviour and my actions that I've had to like work on, and I've had to like sit with and amend. But that part of me saying like there weren't outside of it. It didn't feel like it didn't feel, even though it was glaringly obvious that it were a problem. If you'd have told me a week before that moment you're gonna be moving to Liverpool and you're gonna be clean, or you're gonna get into recovery, I'd have been like, what the fuck you on about?
Yeah, and
No, I'm not.
and that fear you mentioned as well, you know, of like, you know, being scared to do that. I mean, that's an amazing thing to do, isn't it? But reflecting now, when you're looking back, go, well, actually, I was really scared and nervous for taking that next leap, but God, it's paid off, you know.
Yeah, because the pain of carrying on outweighed the pain of doing something different, and I think what's really like important with like the culture that like Damien John Kelly has is that it's constantly like adding to this narrative of recovery. The recovery narrative is incredibly strong, and like how it communicates what that is, what that looks like, because by adding to that narrative there is more understanding for people that might be a bit more curious, might be like in a similar situation to me where they're working, and because they're working they feel that they've got something that they can cling on to that can like prevent them from accessing support. And it also like communicates to people that aren't just like addicts or alcoholics, because I feel that everybody at some stage in their life has to access some kind of recovery, where behaviourally they'll be doing something, or they'll find themselves in a pattern where they keep doing the same thing and keep getting the same results, and in order to change that requires a form of recovery to change. And it's a very like inclusive place. On a Friday we have guests. We'll invite people in from like all areas of life, and share what it is that we do, why we do it, who it's benefiting, the current residents are present, and yeah, kind of like it's not like a separate thing from the community, the wider community in Wavertree. They're very much like a part of the High Street. It's like we invite people in. You know, we had like a car-free day of a week, and we did like 3 open sessions where members of public could come in, and we had some at residents sharing. So I think that's something that's really important about it. Really important about we have a good idea of what addiction is. You know, it's much more visible than what recovery is, and by talking about recovery, yeah, I don't know, like if, again, when I come back to that version of me saying, if there were, I don't know, okay, it's difficult to say, because what happened, how it were meant to happen, and I don't know, like, what would have changed it, but if there were, like, more, like, reference to people that are, yeah, like, inactive recovery, what does that look like? What does a man in recovery look like? Do you know what I mean? And I think that's something that Damien John Kelly House does really well. It constantly shows that.
Does that kind of like inspire and motivate and, you know, keep people abstinent in the first place, really?
I think what like keeps people abstinent is like back to that time. So in them 2 years of living there, what I found out was that it's not like the cure, but like the solution to addiction is connection, belonging, and purpose. So that's the complete opposite to how I felt in addiction, because I didn't feel like I had any purpose. Didn't really feel like I had any connection, and I tried to get connection through using X, Y, and Z, and I didn't feel like I belonged anywhere. So living in a community of men, I experienced all them things, and that's what makes like abstinence. Because again, like hearing that word abstinence, it becomes with like a connotation. If I'd have heard that back like before I moved to Liverpool, I'd be like, it wouldn't be a term that I could get my head around again, because I have no understanding of what it is. Like stopping drinking is the start. It's not like if you stop and then don't make the changes necessary after, you don't like. If I wouldn't have like been in that community, and if I didn't look at my behaviours or my past or my family system or my views, then I'd have just drank again. Because no changes if no changes. Stopping using and drinking puts you in a position to change. You can't change before you put it down. Putting it down gives you the opportunity to do the work.
Yeah. One of the common words that you keep saying, which a lot of other guests have said, from sort of like, you know, places where they go to get help and support and be part of, is that community word. And I think that is so powerful for Damien John Kelly House. And in particular, if you've got, you know, a group of men, and as you said before, you know, that can be a daunting experience for some people, knowing that's what they're going into is to be with other men. But how much is that kind of lived experience of being around other people who have similar stories in a way, you know, is that part of that community, would you say?
Yeah, massively. I think, like, it's the whole thing of, like, not being, like, you need other people to recover. That's something that I've found to be true. Because, like, I need to, like, let people in. I need to be able to connect to people. So community living within like that recovery setting, it highlights that stuff. So like it highlights like your relational behaviour, and like it gets pointed out in like in house meetings, in group therapy sessions, because you can't hide in it, especially when you've got like a really strong like recovery culture. That behaviours get like ultimately challenged for like the best reasons, because people will be in them like behaviours without actually knowing that that's what's happening, and providing like a loving space to challenge them and where them come from. I think like the things around like art, sport and culture, that again ties directly into community, because it's all stuff that you can do together. You know, there's like another graduate, Eddie, who does an exercise session every, I think it's Tuesday and Thursday on Everton Hills. He's done that since he left house, so he's like maintained his connection to Damien John Kelly House through the exercise part of it, which is an activity that everybody does together. And because everybody does it together, they can support each other. To go and run 30 flights of stairs on Everton Brow on your own is much harder than doing it with a group of lads that are all pulling together and they're all doing it. And that's same for art. It's same for going to theatre. It's art, sport and culture allow a place for community to like bind to it, to attach itself to.
I think there's that reward in it as well, isn't there? You know, the encouragement from others and the praise from others and the sense of achievement for yourself as well. You know, when you have just ran up the 30 flights of stairs or created a piece of art or something, there's all of those things which we know are really good for our mental health in the first place as well, which is incredible, isn't it? What sort of, I said at the very start, you know, you're a very creative person yourself. What types of things do you do, again, to sort of like, you know, maintain your sort of abstinence and to keep yourself mentally well? What types of things do you do in terms of creative work?
So like a big thing for me, which is like made up a lot of like my like life in recovery, is like the relationship between creativity and recovery. So when I was a young'un, I was like creative. I used to like paint figures and draw, and when I got to about 13, I kind of like had this view that if I were going to fit in, if I were going to be one of the lads, then this like authentic bit of me couldn't come with me. And it's about time when I started drinking as well, and I like cut creativity out of my life for about 10 years. And then it come back in my early 20s. And I had like, I did do bits of like writing and collage and bits of creativity, but I could never like fully commit to it. I started taking photos the year before I moved to Liverpool. But I couldn't ever, like I said, I couldn't ever fully commit, because how could I commit to it when 95% of my energy is going on changing how I feel? So when I moved there, to begin with, I did the suggested things. I went to the Brink to start with, and then from Brink I went to Sharp. So Brink is like a recovery service and a cafe in Liverpool, and Sharp is like a day rehab, a non-residential rehab. So I did all that, and then like at back end of Sharp, and like I'd started to like peel back the layers into like started to make sense of like a lot of things. And at back end of that experience, that's when I started to like find creativity again. It started with like writing, and then I started taking photos more. But a big point was I used to go to the library. So I used to go to the library, and I used computers in the library, and I'd look at books in the library and that. And I've been going for a bit, and I started like looking on computers about like, oh, what is there in Liverpool? What is the galleries and stuff like that, and just got really curious with it. And I found the Open Eye Gallery, and I first seen it, and I was like, oh, that looks really fancy, that. I don't know about that. Yeah. And I left it for like 2 weeks, and then I'd been back in the library again, and I was looking, and they had a volunteer event on, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna go. Like, psych me sent up, G me sent up. Yeah. And I went down, and because I want like white wall galleries, or that's not something that I like experienced a lot of. Do you know what I mean? That like I've been in them before, but felt very uncomfortable, and that like view that this is not a place for me. Do you know what I mean? And walking down that day, it felt quite similar to like how I felt when I was going to DJKH for the first day. And I got there, and I just went and like sat down in corner, and Natalie come up. She works there, and she come and like started chatting with me. And she said, would you be up for volunteering? And I was like, yo, really? So I was like, yeah, I'm super interested in volunteering. So she gave me a form, I took it back next day, and I started volunteering at Gallery. And that was like a big thing, because it was like proper art, my comfort zone. But I absolutely loved it. I loved it because I was like, it just, I don't know, it like lit that bit of me head up. This thing that I'd like been interested in but not being able to fully commit. It felt like I was taking like a big step towards committing to something that feels very much like a part of who I am. And I just, again, that same like ethos that I'd started picking up from Damien John Kelly House about saying yeah to stuff, I did that. So when I started volunteering, they'd be like, oh, somebody's cancelled, can you come in tomorrow? And I'd be like, yeah, I can. And then when I was there, I'd just ask loads of questions. I was like, what's this photographer on about? What's he saying? What does this mean? So just got really curious, asked loads of questions, and by doing that, I started to learn more about photography. And because I was applying myself more in photography, that was like asking questions of me recovery as well. Because all them notions are like self-doubt, or that's not for me, I'm not good enough to go into this space. That's all stuff that I experience in life. But I'm meeting that in a creative process. And then I started to lift all them ideas out of what I was like coming across in open eye gallery and stuff. Like the staff that I were working, there's a lad called Deck that were like really influential in that. All these different ideas in photography. And I can remember one day I was like, why don't you do something like that? And I was like, really? And I was like, all right, yeah, I will. Yeah. So yeah, lifted all them ideas that I was learning there and just applied them into house. And they'd done some like, they put something in program about like leading like a session or something like that. And I did like a photography one. And then off back of that, I was like, oh, can I do an art group? And that art group has now been running for over four and a half years. I'd say. Just after lockdown, we started doing that.
Do you know what I love? You know, you mentioned like around about the age of 13, you kind of cut creativity out almost like cutting a limb off, and it sounds like it's grew back and it's like really flourished. And everything, every time we do a Man Hug podcast, we always have these amazing stories of people who use methods for either getting their emotion out or for enhancing their well-being or anything. But it just sounds like your creative side's now back. It's a big part of who you are, and it helps you so much, you know. And we've had musicians and filmmakers and poets and all kinds of people on, and they all say this same type of thing, you know, without it they'd feel lost now. And you know, they're so thankful that they have that creative side. It's so powerful to use, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And like for me, it that I get a lot, all that stuff that we're talking about earlier around like that. There's not a cure for addiction, but there's a pretty good solution, and that solution is purpose, connection, and belonging. And I get all them in the creative process, and you know, bringing people together in that as well, and like sharing that like joy with others, basically. And again, like that question that you asked earlier about like how was Damien John Kelly House like affected me, or like what's my experience, like all that stuff, like the way that I am with my art, the way that I bring people together, the way that I still say yes to stuff, that I still do my best to keep an open mind, to be willing in like what I'm doing, and to be honest in it. They're all values that I've learned there, and like I don't know, like I try and like carry that, and I try and carry like up the messages from people that have helped me, because I'd not be doing what I'm doing now if it weren't for other people that have come before me and have put their hand out basically and be like, this is going to be really uncomfortable for at least 18 months, but we've got you.
That's amazing. Well, I think you're the perfect person for me to ask, but like, what advice would you give to anyone looking for that next level of support?
I'd say like get like really like honest with what it is that like it's in like a drug and alcohol situation, like that like acceptance that I've got all this evidence to suggest that when I drink and use, this happens, and to like accept that all that evidence is saying something, and the next time that you think it's going to be different, it's not going to be different. It's going to be exactly the same as how it's always been. And then to look at like services that are there, like Liverpool was brilliant for recovery. It's got a really strong like recovery community. Engaging in them services.
And as you said, it might appear scary, mightn't it, at first, and it might be hard work for however long, but God, it's worth it in the long term, would you say?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like the Brink's a brilliant place to start. Like, I'm really glad that that's like when that got suggested to me, that's what I went to. I think I went to Brink like the second day that we were here. And they're brilliant to like signpost you to other services. And of course, like, yeah, Damien John Kelly House as well. Like, if there's, it's quite full at minute. But even if for people to just come and join us for a game of footy, but yeah, get curious around like what recovery is.
Yeah, and how your life can change or how your life can look. Yeah, it's really important, isn't it? Just on what you were saying about Damien John Kelly House, if anyone is listening and they want to, access support or look into those next steps, what would they do for that process?
I think the best way to approach or like ask questions is through social media. So like active on Twitter, Facebook. So get straight through there.
Yeah. We were talking at the start, weren't we, about the viral video from last year of singing the Elbow song, the Damien John Kelly House choir. It absolutely blew me away. It was just such an incredible thing, and Guy Garvey from Elbow picked up on it, didn't he, and retweeted it and everything, and it just went huge. So there's quite a big social media presence, isn't there?
Yeah, definitely. The social media presence like adds to like communicating like what we do as a community. Like we're very like active in like the documentation of like what we do, and like constantly like adding to this narrative that these are 17 fellas having a good go. Like getting stuck into life, trying new things,
supporting each other.
Each other, yeah.
That's how it always looks. It looks incredible. Amazing. So for yourself, Sam, what's next for you? What have you got lined up for the future?
I've got another book, photography book, coming out at the end of this month. I just launched one last week in London.
And what are they called?
This one is called, the one that I've released last week is called Standing in the Same River Twice.
Wow, okay.
And the one at the end of the month is The Point of Non-Existence.
Wow.
I've been doing a lot of work back home, so I've been making a film about Barnsley, like a documentary around like a contemporary portrait of the town, and that being told by people who live there, work there. Like a story of the town through creativity, community, and some of its heritage. So
I've got to say as well, he's got one of the best tattoos I've ever seen with E-Buy Gum on it. I mean, you can't get more Barnsley than that, can you? That should be the name of your film, really.
E-Buy Gum.
Fantastic. You got to your film in Barnsley. When are you looking for a sort of an end date for that? Is it
February that'll be finished for. Yeah.
Wow, amazing. Yeah, you have to keep us posted. We'll love to come and watch it. Yeah,
Definitely.
Sounds brilliant. Thanks so much for sharing everything. Your own story, honestly, it's so inspirational for the fact of, you know, you're another inspiration of someone who has took that hard leap, something that was scary, and they've done it, and it's changed for so much for the better, your life, you know. And I think now you're helping other people as well. It's incredible, you know. Damien John Kelly House, it just sounds amazing, and I think you're a great ambassador for it, flying the flag very high for them, you know. But thanks so much for sharing all about what they do and how people can access their support as well. Hopefully if people are listening, and whether that's for themselves or to help and signpost other people, I think it's painted an amazing picture of how incredible it is as a community space and enabling recovery for people, really.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you once again. Sam, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thanks for having us on, mate. Yeah.
Thanks, bud. Please make sure that you follow us on Twitter. It's @TheManHug. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next month.
If you or anybody else you know is struggling with their mental health, visit hubofhope.co.uk or download the app today and find local and national mental health support.